Good evening. Welcome back to the YouTube channel. This is Lucas, aka 3 Point Spanish King, and today we've got the Cricket Badger, aka James Butler, and this stream or this episode is going to be all about the Ashes. Since we're less than 12 days away, it's going to be very fantastic. I know I can't wait. I'm literally jumping out of my skin. I wish it was tomorrow. I'm that excited for it. So James is our guest. Thank you, James, for joining this program.
Good to see you, Lucas. Good to see you. I'm glad you're smiling now because you won't be soon.
I shouldn't actually laugh. I've told you why I'm in a lot of pain, but I won't get into that. It's embarrassing, but I shouldn't be laughing.
If I'm gonna crow, I might as well do it now before England starts to lose test matches.
Yes. What a huge couple of weeks since England arrived in the country. We've had different captaincies. We've had Ben Stokes returning, playing in a warm-up match. England played in their warm-up match today. Huge news going around about Tim Payne, Steve Smith back as vice captain, which some have said that's very strange. So we'll start with the new captaincy of Pat Cummins. Personally, I was very surprised by this. I didn't think they would go down a bowling direction. Having said that, Pat Cummins has been in this squad for a very long time now, albeit he has been injured, but he's extremely experienced. Still, I thought Steve Smith would have been the best candidate, but they have decided to go with Pat Cummins. What's your take on that situation, James?
I can understand why they haven't gone with Steve Smith. Sandpaper gate is still fresh in the memory, isn't it? The Cricket Australia said at the time that they wouldn't be able to give them leadership roles in the, I can't remember if it's the near future or ever, but certainly Australia haven't played that many games since then, have they? And I think it'd send out the wrong signal, and I think it would put unfair pressure on Steve Smith actually if he was given the captaincy, now. Giving the vice captaincy kind of gets him into a leadership role without getting him the captaincy, doesn't it? And gets him back into the sort of at the top table. I like Pat Cummins. I tweeted the other day that it's the first time in living memory I can actually 100% say I like an Australian captain, and because he just comes across as a really good guy. He's a fantastic cricketer, but he's been chosen for a reason, hasn't he? He's been chosen because he's squeaky clean. I would imagine that any skeletons in his closet are fairly skinny ones, and he's unlikely to cause Cricket Australia embarrassment. I think he's a clever bloke. I think they will have Pat Cummins leading the side, but Steve Smith probably taking charge when he's bowling, which will give him the chance to kind of switch off and just concentrate on what he's good at. I think it's actually a really good appointment myself. I think Australia, I worry because, last time we spoke, I was quite happy when Tim Payne was captain of Australia. And I think that the fact that Alex Carey is coming in, you don't lose anything with the gloves. And I think you're going to have a player that can actually score test centuries rather than somebody that fiddles around with 20s and 30s and at best.
I 100% agree with you with Pat Cummins. He's a very nice guy. You don't really see him get fiery. You don't see really him get emotional. Just bowls, does his thing. Then there was one incident where he got a little bit carried away in South Africa. It's incidentally same to as the Sandpaper Gate, where AB de Villiers kind of got in his head a little bit and said a couple of words there. But you don't see Pat Cummins really that much angry. You don't see him as a typical fast Australian bowler. No. You think of these mentalities like Dennis Lillee, Mitchell Johnson, Brett Lee. They're fast, they're furious, they're in your face. Jeff Thompson was also like that. You don't really get that with Pat Cummins. He's very cool, collective on the outside. But my goodness, he's the world's best bowler. Unfortunately, injury has plagued his career. While he's technically still very young, he's still got a lot of years left. It's just a shame that his injuries has cost him a majority of his Test career. And we're also going to welcome in Gaurav, who said he wasn't going to be here today, but he is here today. So welcome,
Gaurav. Can't stay away.
I also want to enjoy the conversation between the two rivals, because the Ashes is about to start, and I want to enjoy. How can I miss that
Yeah.
opportunity? So, just wanted to know about the captaincy. Let's discuss about this captaincy issue more, because it has been a blown away in Australia. Because why Pat Cummins? Because people were expecting that, and Lucas, you were also expecting that Steve Smith will take over, isn't it?
James mentioned that the leadership role was taken away. So to clarify that to the viewers and to James, David Warner has a lifetime national band and a lifetime domestic band in Australia. Hence why David Warner will not be in this year's Big Bash League. He's made that very clear that he
He
won't
never
be
plays
captain.
it.
No, he never plays it. But he I think he wanted to captain the side this year. He wanted to captain the Sydney Sixers, which is his domestic Big Bash team. But he can't captain it domestically because of the ban. And of course, he can't captain Australia ever again or be in the leadership group. So Steve Smith got the 12 months after 2019, that amazing Ashes series that he did have, the Meta series. He was eligible again as captain. Unfortunately, they were very hesitant to give that to him. They were trying to keep Tim Payne as long as they could. And then the fortunate events that's happened to Tim Payne's personal life and all that, etc. I think the opportunity is that they really couldn't shy away from Steve Smith. Other options were Marnus Labuschagne, but he's too young. Yes, he averages 60, but let's be honest. He's only got 5-10 test minutes. He's only been in the game 5 minutes.
He never shuts up, does he? I mean, when he's at
Yeah,
short leg, he never stops talking. So, I personally wouldn't want to be captained by somebody that is
yeah.
always yapping away.
Exactly. The other one that got some mention but never really did it was Nathan Lyon. Obviously, if you're going to give it to Bowl, you're going to give it to Pat Cummins. So really, the two main candidates were Steve Smith and Pat Cummins. A lot of debate. It was 50-50. I personally think that the pointing of Cummins was dictated by too many whistleblowers outside of Cricket Australia. People like Shane Warne, that kind of had his opinion about Steve Smith and David Warner that I don't necessarily agree with. I love Shane Warne as a cricketer. I love his opinions, but that's one thing I respectfully disagree. What he said about David Warner and Steve Smith, saying that they either should be captain or they should be banned for life. I heavily disagree with that. But that is Shane Warne's opinion. I think those kind of opinions kind of, in my mind, put off Steve Smith becoming the actual captain himself.
Don't you think at times, Lucas, that the likes of Shane Warne seem to sit in a dark room thinking, what's the most controversial thing I can say that's going to get me headlines, rather than actually what makes sense?
Well, that's Shane Warne for you. That what else is new with Shane Warne? That's been happening since the late 90s with him. So Shane Warne's very opinionated. Shane Warne was a hero of mine growing up in the golden generation of cricket Australia. But there are opinions that I disagree with him mostly, and there are opinions I disagree and agree with him at times, and this is one of them I heavily disagree with. So I think the Steve Smith influence was dictated too much by outside interference, in my opinion.
Yeah, you're right.
And is why Pat Cummins made captain in my mind. But
Okay,
that's just my opinion.
I have a one question for both of you guys. Okay, is this the reason that Ashes, because obviously it's a big series, and after that Australia will be traveling to the Asian condition for playing the test matches in Pakistan, India. That's the reason that Steve Smith has been made the vice captain, because the toughest series is coming up. After that, Australia might see Marnus Labuschagne as a vice captain, or is this the permanent that Steve Smith might be the candidate for a very long period of time as a vice captain? Lucas and James, I want the answer from both of you.
I don't see it like that. I think you don't make a captain just purely for one series, particularly an Ashes series. You basically set the tone. You're making that appointment, hoping that they're going to be in post and successful for the next 4 or 5 years, aren't you? You're not. You can't just bring in a captain for one series and then say, "Tatty, bye. We're going somewhere different. We're going to basically go with somebody else now." I don't see Marnus Labuschagne. I mean, I think Marnus Labuschagne is probably England's biggest threat when it comes to actually batting. I think he is a serious player. I don't see him as a leader. I mean, as Lucas said, he's only been in the side 5 minutes. He's got to. There will be a time he goes through a rough period as well. You don't get anybody. Even Bradman went through rough periods. Labuschagne will do the same, and I think giving him the captaincy possibly even accelerates that. You just want somebody like him bedding in, scoring runs, and being part of the team. I think, Steve Smith, fine. He's used to leadership roles. Pat Cummins has been around long enough now to cope with it. I don't think you look at, Lucas mentioned Nathan Lyon. I think he's kind of a cheerleader on the pitch. He's not necessarily a strategic brain. And I think they've made a good choice. I'd have gone with Pat Cummins if it had been me. And I mean, to be honest, from an English perspective, I'd have kept Tim Payne. But that's done and dusted.
Well, personally, I would have went with David Warner, but he's got his lifetime ban. Ironically, that's me saying that after what's happened in Sandpaper Gate, but that's just me. Cricket Australia is all about ruthlessness. You look at their captain, Steve Waugh was very ruthless. Ricky Ponting, to a degree, was ruthless. Mind you, he had one of the best squads in the history of cricket. Michael Clarke was a little bit like that. So all these Test captains that Australia have had, Alan Border was very ruthless in his era. He was ruthless to his own players, let alone the opposition. So I just was going of that mentality. Why I would have went with David Warner. But
you can't, Lucas. You can't bring Dave off the back of Sandpaper Gate. Then another controversy that's seen Tim Payne get sacked. You can't bring in David Warner because he is potentially a ticking time bomb waiting to happen, isn't he? You've got to bring in. They're giving it to a safe pair of hands, haven't they?
Yeah. Well, they have gave it. Well, it depends what you mean by safe. Apart from the Sandpaper incident, David Warner's been pretty clean on the field. Yes, he's had abusive problems with James Anderson, but everybody has abusive problems on the field with cricketers. David Warner's had incidents off the field with Joe Root, with other players as well domestically.
Don't you think that Warner wants to, in the same way I said Labuschagne needs to concentrate on scoring runs? I think Warner's come through an 18-month period where he hasn't been at his best. He started to look like he was finding a little bit of form recently, but I think for Australia, he's very important for you guys at the top of the order. I think giving him the captaincy on top of everything else would burden him too much.
Well, to what you said about Cummins and Smith, I actually agree with you on that. Of course, David Warner's he hasn't played a test since January. Nobody has for Cricket Australia. Because they refused to go to South Africa. They've pulled out of the Afghanistan due to a politic agenda that I heavily disagree on. I won't get into that because we're here to talk cricket, but it's very hard when you don't play cricket since January. That's only 8 months, and England have played almost 15 Test matches since. So there's no doubt that not just David Warner, but Steve Smith, the bowlers, especially Mitchell Starc, they need to find form very quickly. Unfortunately, they don't have any domestic games to play in. And that's what I was so angry with the T20 World Cup. This is why I did not want them to play. So they all need to find form very, very quickly, because while I don't see a threat from England's bowlers, they could, we've seen in the past with England when they won that World Cup, and they looked horrible against Ireland. They got bowled out for something like 80 or 90. They looked absolutely dreadful. That could happen to Australia. That could be underdone. So they all need to find form very quickly. Now, I agree with you with the Pat Cummins and Steve Smith thing. Yes, Pat Cummins was a safe pair of hands. He never gets in. He's never got in trouble. Never, ever off field. On field, he keeps his cool. Like I said, that one incident against AB de Villiers where there was a bit of chirping on. Mind you, de Villiers was tearing everybody around the park that day. So I don't blame Pat Cummins for losing his cool on that occasion. But if this was a once-off Test match, I would probably agree that they're trying to experiment with Pat Cummins, but you don't do that in an Ashes series. You might, if you're going to say, well, that's it after one series, and you might as well have just kept Steve Smith. You don't tinker with an important series like the Ashes. Yes, in my opinion, I think the Ashes will be done by Test 3. I think it'll be a whitewash. I've said that from the very start.
Well, mate, you got to have some faith in your team.
Yeah.
Don't just write Australia off like that. Like, have some faith, Lucas.
Well, with all due respect to the Ashes, we haven't won an Ashes series. Sorry, we haven't not won an Agents.
James, especially when Ben Stokes has come back to the team.
Absolutely, he provides that balance, doesn't he? I mean, he's of. I mean, Lucas talking about Australia being undercooked, but England are undercooked as well. I mean, Australia have basically turned on the showers, haven't they, ever since England have landed there? And Ben Stokes hasn't basically played a competitive match for a long time. He obviously played today. Needs to get. I mean, they're going to take a punt on him. I mean, you can't not do, can you, with somebody like Ben Stokes? You've got to basically just hope that he can be your fifth bowler. Maybe give you 5 or 6 overs spells and get through them okay and bat in the kind of upper middle order. But he just provides that. I mean, we went through the last summer without Ben Stokes, and it makes a massive difference to England's selection for that 11 because you've got 2 players in one with Ben Stokes. You've got a top order batsman, you've got a bowler who can bowl you and win your matches with the ball as well, and certainly give you very solid spells. So without Ben Stokes in the side, you're basically looking for a bowler and a batsman. So you're trying to find 2 places, and it limits you in terms of maybe getting a spinner into the team and just how you can actually stack up that 11. So I think they'll take a punt on Ben Stokes and just hope, sit there with their fingers crossed, hoping he's fit enough to get through the first Test match, second Test match, and then hopefully by then he'll be okay and have a few overs under his belt and be okay again. But he's so important, and I think he's important for Joe Root as well. When Joe Root, you look at Joe Root as a captain, he has that little leadership group around him. Josh Butler's important, I think, in terms of that, and Ben Stokes is massive for him. I think Rooty will be really pleased that Ben Stokes is back.
Well, I do actually want to discuss the playing 11. Now we know England have also, just because they've got a Lions. I think they've troubled with the Lions team, haven't they?
Yeah.
So they've got expansion. So just because their regular Test 11 has been picked for the Ashes does not mean they can get players on the English Lions team. So what would your 11 be for England?
I picked it yesterday actually on the BBC site. And that gave you a few little parameters. But, Rory Burns, Hasib Hamid are the 2 openers in situ. I don't think they're going to break those 2 apart. I can't see Zach Crawley getting into the top 3. So David Milan would be my number 3 in the order. He's got previous experience of playing an Ashes series. Maybe it didn't go hugely well for him, but he scored a century and he's a better player now. So I think David Milan will start at 3. Joe Root obviously at 4. I actually think Ben Stokes is always one place too high at 5. I have him at 6 in my team. I mean, he'll go in at 5. England will play him at 5, but I've got Ollie Pope ahead of him at number 5 and Ben Stokes at number 6. Josh Butler as the wicketkeeper batsman at number 7. And then the bowling is interesting because you've got, I've seen a lot of different teams being picked by English fans, and they all try and shoehorn both Broad and Anderson into the same side. Everybody seems to want Chris Wokes to play despite him having a terrible record overseas. I think he's a better bowler now. But I think with England, they will rotate as they go through. I don't think any bowler will bowl in 5 Test matches. So my team for the first Test would be Ollie Robinson at number 8, Mark Ward at number 9, Jack Leach is the spinner at 10, and Jimmy Anderson at number 11, because that gives you a little bit of variety in the attack. Obviously, Ben Stokes is there as well. He can bowl rockets for 2 or 3 overs if he wants to. But you've got Mark Wood with his pace. You've got Ollie Robinson, who is a little bit similar to Jimmy Anderson. But if you bring Wokes in there, you bring Broad in there as well, they're all a little bit samey. So I'd have just Ward as the pace bowler, Jimmy Anderson for his experience, Ollie Robinson, who is a little bit unknown as well. The Australians won't know too much about him. And then you've got Jack Leach as your spinner with Ben Stokes as your backup seamer. I think that actually gives you quite a good attack for that first Test match. You're leaving out Craig Overton, you're leaving out Chris Wokes. and you're leaving out Dom Bess and Stuart Broad. Now, Stuart Broad might stomp about and he might look grumpy after being left out of the first Test match. I'm happy with that because we've seen that before. When he gets annoyed, second Test match, Australia, watch out, because he'll be back and he'll be, he'll be up for it. There is the argument that Stuart Broad's got a little bit of a thing over David Warner, but I don't think you can pick a bowler just for one batsman. You've got to pick a bowler for 5 days Test match cricket. And I think with Jimmy Anderson and Stuart Broad getting on a little bit, I don't think either is necessarily. They're fantastic bowlers, don't get me wrong, and their record is incredible. But I don't think I'd play them together in the first Test match.
Is there any players left at home that you would have liked to see in this 11?
Matt Parkinson's on the Lions tour, so he's there potentially. If England fall apart in the first 2 Test matches, they could quite easily turn to whoever's doing well with the Lions. Obviously, they haven't had a huge amount of cricket either because they've been playing in the same match that the England first team's been playing.
I saw that, yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, going through the Lions team, Alex Lees, Durham, he's captain of the Lions. Tom Abel, though, Lees had a good season. I don't know whether he'd be first choice to come in as an opener, though. Tom Abel, I think, is a terrific player. Somerset captain. Josh Bohannon has had a great season for Lancashire. James Bracey had his try with England. Didn't look great, but he's a far better player than that. And I'm hoping he has a good Lions tour. Harry Brook's been superb for Yorkshire for a couple of seasons now, and he's an England player in waiting. And then you've got a number of others as well. Ben Foakes, obviously, is on that trip as the reserve keeper. But you've obviously got Bairstow and Butler in the first team, if you like. But Matt Parkinson's the one for me. Rob Yates is also in that Lions squad after a really good season. Rob Yates churned out loads and loads of runs, and so there's a few batsmen there in waiting, and you've got Matt Parkinson as a leggy, who, if the spinners don't come up trumps and they're looking for some magic fix, you could see Matt Parkinson getting thrown in. I'd have liked to have seen Parkinson play last winter in Sri Lanka, but that didn't happen. But he's there waiting in the wings if need be. But I think, in general, if you include the Lions as one big squad with the first team, they've got pretty much all bases covered there. If they have an emergency, they've got people waiting to come in.
Are you surprised? Now, we joked about this a couple of months ago because we didn't know if the Ashes are going off, and we were talking about B teams. But are you generally surprised that Darren Stevens and Luke Fletcher are not part of this Lions team?
No. I love both of those two guys.
Yeah.
But I don't think Darren Stevens isn't rapid. I think in Australia he'd be quite easy to face. He's got the batting. You could put him at number 8 in the order or something, and that would provide Australia with some problems potentially. But I think his time for England's gone.
Yep.
And I think they're quite right to now look. I mean, if you're going to pick him, you're going to pick him sort of 2 or 3 seasons ago. And Luke Fletcher is much improved. But
your leading wicket taker in the county season, I think. Yeah,
I think sometimes in the count. I mean, I hate the term dibbly dobbly, and Luke Fletcher's certainly not a dibbly dobbly. But I think there's bowlers ahead of him. I mean, Saqib Mahmood's in that Lions trip. I mean, he's ahead of him in the pecking order. I mean, Saqib could come into that first squad as well, because he bowls rapid and it gets a little bit of reverse swing, so he could be quite useful if they need to go in. If Mark Wood can't get through 5 Test matches, then Saqib Mahmood is next off the conveyor belt kind of thing. So I think they've got a lot of players there that can do a job. It's going to be tough for England, don't get me wrong. I mean, I joke with you about don't have faith in Australia, but we all know the record that England have on tours to Australia. Touring Australia and India, probably for England, are the 2 hardest tours that they're ever going to face. So if Joe Root can get anything out of this series, fair play to him.
Okay, so you've done your squad. We've got a question in Shiva. Why Lucas is wearing a cap at 3 a.m. at night? Have no idea. Good question. Just a superstitious thing. Something I wear my cap in my house. So this is my team. Now, there's some names you may not have heard of. But I'm just going to go through it. Obviously, number 1, I've gone with David Warner.
Yeah.
Number 2, Marcus Harris is in this team. I think that's a ridiculous decision because his Sheffield Shield form is dreadful, absolutely terrible. I would have gone with Tim Ward, a young promising batsman from Tasmania. Now, I mentioned him a couple of months ago.
Yeah.
he made 180 in his first game. Now, since the SOS has been sent out to curators to make green tops, he has fallen away off a bit. But the last couple of innings on those green tops, he's made 50s and 60s. I think that's pretty good. I'd rather someone score a 50 on a green top than 100 on a road, in my personal opinion. 4, I've got 3, I've got Labuschagne, of course. 4, Steve Smith. 5, I've got Travis Head. Now you can say this is biased because I'm from South Australia. I recently saw Travis Head make that 100 against Queensland a week ago, in a fighting lost where they got absolutely smashed. But he was a real standout, and on a very bowling friendly wicket. These two here probably they're going to be the doozies. Number 6, I've got Hilton Cartwright. I think Hilton Cartwright's form in the domestic season has been fantastic. I think he's the best number 6 going around. He plays in the same team as Cameron Green. He scored more runs than Cameron Green. He's taken more wickets than Cameron Green. So that's just my personal preference. Now 7, the wicketkeeper still. I have not got Alex Carey. Again, from South Australia, I love Alex Carey. I think he is the best gloveman, no doubt about that. But batsman, his highest score is 30 in this Sheffield Shield. He's averaging 20. Now, a week ago, he got 100 in the white ball competition, the Marsh Cup. Fantastic. That's got nothing to do with red ball cricket. I would have went with Jimmy Peirson. He scored 2 100s already in the Sheffield Shield season. The average of 44, 45. I would have went with him personally. Now, not as good as gloveman as Alex Carey, but Australia, have this obsession that we got to find the next Gilchrist. Well, it seems to me the last couple of years they've gone away from that logic. They're complaining about that for many, many years. They've gone with Tim Payne, and now they're going to go with Alex Carey. I just would have went with Jimmy Peirson.
What do you think to Josh Inglis?
Again, this is why I don't like the T20 World Cup so close to any Test series. Josh Inglis played one domestic game against South Australia. That was actually early in the year. Well, not early in the year, but early in the season, October, before they went to the T20 World Cup. He only made 20, and I think 11. So he didn't really do much, and neither did Alex Carey in that game. So he hasn't played enough Sheffield Shield season, in my opinion, to get picked. Last season, he was outstanding. He was the keeper of the tournament, and his glove work has got a little bit better as time goes by. But I would have just picked Jimmy Peirson, just giving that extra batting.
He's a fighter, Jimmy Peirson, as well. I mean, I watched the Heat in the Big Bash last season.
Yeah.
And you're quite right to say that white ball cricket and red ball cricket are two almost different sports these days. But you get to see a little bit of the character of a guy, and he really does fight. He's a little terrier, isn't he? And I like that.
Yeah, and he's only 28, 27. He's not young. He's not old. He's at the right age. And I seen him bat live. I seen him made that 100 against South Australia live. And I really liked what I saw. Yes, it was against a dismal South Australian attack. Nothing seems to change there when it comes to South Australia. But I really like Jimmy Peirson this season. Now number 8, of course, Cummins as the captain. Now number 9, I've not put Mitchell Starc here. I've gone with Steketee from Queensland. Same height as Mitchell Starc, fast bowler. I've seen him again live in that same Sheffield Shield match where he took a fifer on pretty much a road at Karen Orton Oval. I think his pace would be very good on these wickets where he bowls a heavy ball. He can penetrate the pitches. Mitchell Starc has been out of form for months, since January, since the Indian Test match. When he played in that T20 World Cup final, I think he went for none for 60. Something ridiculous. I did not see that World Cup final. But I think he went for none for 60. Yeah, something absolutely ridiculous.
The only thing with Mitchell Starc is, if he gets it right for a spell, he can take you 3 or 4 wickets in that spell. Absolutely.
He's very potent. He's probably got the best Yorker in world cricket. Reverse swing, best probably when he's reverse swinging that ball with a Yorker length. He's unplayable. But that's far and few between. We haven't seen that in 2 years with Mitchell Starc, unfortunately. You say that he was out of form in January. He hasn't played a Test match since, has he? Well, yeah, in the Indian series, he was very poor in that Indian series. with all due respect to
He's a Yorkshireman, Mitchell Stark. He played a season for Yorkshire, so I've got a soft spot for him.
Oh, okay, I see. So that's why I've got Mark Steketee. I've seen him live, and he's very impressive. Not as quick as Mitchell Stark, can't bowl 155, but he can bowl 140, 145 plus very easily. And of course, number 10, 11, of course, Nathan Lyon. I would like to see a second spinner, but I don't think this is a place where you can experiment, because we have a couple of Asian teams coming up, Test series, and I would like to see Mitch Shrepson. I'd like to see Matt Kuhneman from Queensland, who's been the leading Sheffield Shield taker for spin.
Yeah.
But this is not the time.
Shrepson's in the squad, isn't he?
Shrepson is in the squad, yes. Once again, he hasn't played domestic cricket because he's part of the T20 World Cup squad. But this is not really the time to experiment in an Ashes series, with all due respect. But I would have liked to see him in this series one way or another. And of course, Levin, I think the best bowler after Cummins is Josh Hazlewood.
Yep.
No doubt. So that would be my 11. Very different from what's even in the squad. I think picking Marcus Harris and Alex Carey, I think that's a name pick. I think that they just picked that basically on name, in my opinion. And that's very disappointing for me to see that. So other one is Usman Khawaja. That's in the squad now. He's another one that's taken a lot of runs in the Sheffield Shield. But my opinion on that is he's had his time. He's had so many chances like Sean Marsh has. Yeah. Sean Marsh is another one that's been making a lot of runs in the Sheffield Shield, but won't be considered anymore because he's had so many chances. I think Usman Khawaja's time's done. When push comes to shove, I think they'll go with him over Travis Head, unfortunately.
So?
Which is good. I think so. I think they'll pick Usman Khawaja because of the runs he's scoring in Sheffield Shield. I don't think 100 is going to save Travis Head, unfortunately. And Usman Khawaja has been scoring them everywhere. He made a 70 on a green top, where Queensland got bowled out for 120 a couple of weeks ago. So I think that was the defining match that probably will get him in that squad. I think I wouldn't agree with it, like I said. So it has nothing to do with Travis Head. I just think Usman Khawaja's time has came and done. And they're highly considering him, putting him in as an opener. I'm not a huge fan. Everybody's obsessed with the left-hand, right-hand combination. I don't care about that. I care about the best chemistry. Yes, when a right-hander bowls, it's good to have different combinations, or when a left-hander bowls, etc., etc. I don't buy that, in my opinion. There's no real evidence to suggest otherwise. Langer and Hayden were probably Australia's best openers in the history of Australian cricket, and they were left and right-handers too. But there's been other good opening combinations that haven't been left and right-handed combinations. I think everyone's obsessed with that. So I think they probably would pick Khawaja in as an opener and move Harris down to 5. Cricket Australia basically said Harris will play. So that's not good for Travis Head. Not good for me, the South Australian fans. But I think when push comes to shove, I see Khawaja playing over Travis Head, unfortunately.
Okay. That's an interesting team. I mean, obviously that team's impossible, isn't it? Because you've got people outside the squad there. But I mean, Cam Green's interesting because he's been spoken about for two or 3 years now as being the next big thing. Australia don't have many all-rounders, do they? Australia have lots of bowlers, lots of batsmen, but don't have too many that can do both. And I guess that's why Cam Green's seen as being quite important, isn't he? Because he provides potentially the balance that Stokes does for England.
Australia never really have had that all-rounder. They've had the Shane Watsons, the Mitch Marshes, but they're not Ben Stokes. They're not Jadeja. Even the spinning all-rounder, Australia have never really had that. Even in the golden generation, I think the best person that came to an all-rounder was Brett Lee. And he was no all-rounder by any means. He could throw the bat. Mitchell Johnson was another one, but Australia never really had that opener. And I think personally they've got carried away with Cameron Green. I'm not convinced by Cameron Green at all. I wasn't convinced by him in the Indian series. Yes, he made that 70, but I think that when he made that 70, I think that was an ODI innings where Australia had a lead of 200, 250, only 4 down. I think Cameron Green can play freely. And I think a player of his calibre is a bit like Alex Carey, very good in the white ball conditions. But red ball cricket, not their forte. And Cameron Green's bowling was not as impressive as I thought it would be. People complain that you can bowl 140, and another problem exists in this country with the obsession with bowling 140. If you can't bowl 140, then you can't play. So
yeah, that's an obsession everywhere, though, isn't it?
Yeah,
Everybody's like that.
It is. And Cameron Green got nowhere near that. And all I heard was the excuse, well, he was injured. Well, if he was injured, why was he playing in the Indian series? So yes, he's made a ton of runs in the Sheffield Shield season, but like I said, I think Hilton Cartwright has completely outperformed him this season in the Sheffield Shield. He's been taking wickets with Hilton Cartwright more than Cameron Green. And I've been watching the Sheffield Shield very closely, and Cameron Green's bowling is probably no better than it was last year, in my opinion. Doesn't really hold up an end, can't swing a ball. I don't see any difference in his pace. And Ian Chappell, who made that ridiculous, blasphemous statement saying he's got the best technique since Ricky Ponting, was completely just blasphemy, ridiculous, by Ian Chappell to say such garbage. And it's clearly put pressure on him because of comments like that. Cricketers say they ignore that. You don't ignore comments like that.
Even if you do try and ignore it, you go to a press conference and everybody draws your attention to it. Yeah.
So I'm just not. I get bashed a lot on Twitter for not supporting Cameron Green, but I'm just not convinced by him at all. Not at all. I'm sorry, but I just don't see it.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I mean, in reality, it's going to be Warner, Harris, Labuschagne, Smith, Heddle, Khawaja, Cam Green, Alex Carey, Cummins, Stark, Lyon, Hazelwood, isn't it? That's what they're going to pick.
The one outside of that, if there was anyone in the bowlers that would be threat, it would be Stark, but not for Steckity. It'd be for Jai Richardson.
Yeah.
There's a lot of talk about Jai Richardson that could replace Stark.
I saw a quote this morning. Somebody said that in a press conference, didn't they? That he's going to play a big part in the series. But
however, he's only just recently came back from injury. Jai Richardson. He's only played 2 Sheffield Shield matches. While I must admit he has looked very impressive in those Sheffield Shield matches, he's only played 2 matches. So a little bit like Ben Stokes, he hasn't played cricket for ages. Only those 2 Sheffield Shield matches, and he got injured in one of those games. He did a shoulder, and scans came back all clear, but he didn't bowl for the rest of the game. Next week he played and was pretty impressive, I must say. So that's the only one I could say out of the bowlers that could be under threat is Stark for Jai Richardson. But the big one is the opener. Well, they said Harris will play, so there's no doubt about that. But it's either Khawaja or Travis Head. That's the real. That's the 50-51, and I think they will go Khawaja's way because of the runs he's been scoring at Sheffield Shield level. Unfortunately for Travis Head and the South Australian fans. Not that being a South Australian fan that we'll miss Travis Head. We'll definitely miss Travis Head. We can't stink up the joint any much worse than we already can with the Redbacks if Travis Head goes. But that's just the reality of that. Khawaja, I would say, is probably 60-40 over Travis Head.
I mean, Head's had quite a few chances, and I like him. I mean, he's a Yorkie as well. He's played for Yorkshire.
Yes,
but he does seem to have come in a lot and gone out a lot because he's not taken his opportunities in the past, has he?
Yeah, he is a concentration problem. He just doesn't get out. He gets out to the same shot. Whether it's cover driving, playing a ball he should leave, he loses concentration, and that's very disappointing because he does have a technique. He's a very, very balanced cricketer, Travis said, that incidentally can bowl part-time spin. He actually bowls a lot of overs for South Australia, which is no surprising, probably no fault of his own because they can't take wickets. So he's required to bowl a lot probably a lot more than Joe Root does for his country when he's picked as a mainline spinner, frontline spinner. So you do have that little part with Travis Head that Usman doesn't pick, but if you're relying on part-time spinners to take wickets in Australia, then you're in a little bit of trouble. So
just go back to your question to me about
Yep.
who's not in the England squad that I might have looked at.
Yeah.
The one that just came to mind, I mean, there's two that came to mind, one of which I wouldn't have picked. A lot of people talked about Liam Livingston.
Yep.
But I mean, you look at his first-class record of late. I think he needs to do a lot of work in the red ball. I think his advance in the white ball has come at the expense of his red ball. But James Vince is the one that I would have probably had a look at. I think he's a terrific player. I think if you actually gave him the confidence of selecting him, putting your arm around his shoulder and saying you're one of our picks for the foreseeable, I think he'd respond to that. Because I mean, you talking about Travis Head getting out the same way made me think of James Vince, because that was always the thought with him, was that he could make a fantastic 20 or 30 and then slashed it to second slip and he was on his way. But I think there's been evidence in the last few years that he's maybe just matured a little bit and knows his game a little bit more. And he's scored an ODI 100. Again, that's white ball, not red ball, but that'll give him a little bit of confidence that he's good enough on the international stage. And he was making a fist of it in the last Ashes series. He got to 80 or something like that, and got that ball from Mitchell Stark that hit a brick and basically took his wickets. And I think that was probably one of the last Test matches he played. So I think there's unfinished business for James Vince. I don't know whether he's ever going to get his chance again, but I'd like to see it happen.
Another player that I forgot to mention when I mentioned Fletcher and Stevens is Kieran Carlson. He scored a tremendous amount of runs. I think he averages 70 or 80 in the domestic season gone by, not in the Lions tour.
Yeah.
Is that surprising to you?
I've not seen a huge amount of him. You mentioned him last time I was on, and I've not seen a huge amount of him, to be honest, to give you an assessment. Sometimes, I mean, as you've kind of hinted at a little bit when you made your assessment on the Australians, it's what pitches you're playing on and the match circumstances and stuff like that. That he might have come in at. He might have found himself at 60 for 5 every single innings he's played and rescued it. I don't think that was the case. And I think if you score, like you said, if you score a 70 on a tough day and you get your team up to 250 or something when it was going to be out for 140, that's actually worth more than a double ton on a 790 for 5 declared kind of innings, isn't
Absolutely,
it?
yeah.
So
I agree with that. Yeah,
I can't give you anything more on Kieran Carlson than that, really. But I mean, he's obviously had a good season. With the Lions squad, they've obviously gone for. Kind of the whole point of the Lions squad really is to look to the future. Yes, there's an Alex Lees in there who's older now, James Bracey, but there's also some younger players in there. Ben Folkes is experienced, but there's some younger players in there as well. So it's a kind of a shadow squad with a look to the future at the same time.
Yep. I've got word from our boss that we need to talk about the Indian and New Zealand series. See, even when it's supposed to be an Ashes podcast, the Indians are all over this. We can't keep them out of the game.
I mean, he's rocked up for 2 minutes and he's ordering you around. It's disgraceful.
Unfortunately, because I play cricket in the city myself, I had the opportunity of watching most of the action for the first 2 sessions, and a very brave innings by New Zealand, surviving that draw where most sides probably would have capitulated.
Yeah.
Interesting second test where I heard that's going to be a rank turner. Surprise, surprise. So before the series, I said, well, if Joe Root can take 5 wickets, then hell, Kane Williamson has a chance of taking 5 wickets.
I mean, you know what the Indian curators are like. As soon as they see a draw, they'll have been on that pitch with scouring pads. They'll have been kicking it in. There'll be craters on that second test wicket. You can guarantee it, because that's what India do. And I mean, if I was India, I'd do exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
You know, make the most of your own conditions and play to your strengths. But
I
a
agree with that.
couple of the pitches that England played on, I thought were just a bit. I mean, we're going back in time here, and I'm going to basically get pelters for any Indian fans watching this, but I thought they weren't good for Test cricket. If you've got the potential for a Test match to be over in 2 days, the pitch isn't good enough. Yeah, England didn't play well on it. Yeah, there's all of those factors as well. But a 2-day Test match is not good for anybody. And if you've got a pitch with craters on it where it's turning square, and those pitches weren't, but there was a little bit of uneven every now and again. And I think it was the ones in Ahmedabad that there's one of them was on was it red soil? Every time the ball pitched, it was like there's an explosion, and that was on towards the end of day one. So yeah, that's not great for cricket. Yeah, of course, India play to your strengths. Yeah, of course, make the most of your home conditions. But I think there's a limit to how far you take that.
And it's actually a good point you make, because England, more bowling friendly pitches, New Zealand green tops. I don't think Australia do enough of that. I think because of the drop in wickets, I don't think because of the football codes and winter sports, they can't afford proper pitches in proper stadiums.
I don't think England do enough of it either. Because you look at England's pitches. Yes, of course, you could put a really green track down and water it and make it an absolute snake bit.
Yeah.
But that, there's a lot of finance involved in cricket. And if you get, like I said, if you get every Test match is over in 2 days, that, you're refunding day 3 and 4 tickets. That's not going to do anybody any. So you've got to make it possible for the first innings to go big and see. And if you do that, you kind of foregoing home advantage almost, because if the tourists win the toss, they get first dibs on a track that is decent. So I don't see how you can. I mean, I don't know. I think the Test match that was nearly over in India in 2 days against England ended up going. I
think that was the second Test.
Yeah, ended up going to day 4 in the end. It crawled into day 4. But that's not great for cricket. It's not great for anybody. You don't want people that have bought tickets on day 3 to be worried whether they're going to get to see a match.
Well, it's a kind of pick your poison thing, because in the first 2 rounds of the Sheffield Shield this season in October, there were teams that were scoring 600 runs and declaring on day 5, and teams surviving 2 sessions without loss of a wicket. And every man and his dog was saying, curators, you've got to stop making these roads. And then ever since those last 2 rounds, Australia's been making green top pitches, which you definitely will not see in the first Test match of the Ashes. That will not be a green top pitch, guarantee you that.
In a way, Lucas, an ideal Test match is like 450 plays 400, plays 300, plays whatever they can knock off in the final innings, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And you get runs, but you keep the bowler interested. But it's difficult for groundsmen, isn't it? Because it's not an exact science. Preparing that 22 yards is, you don't want to make it so that it's over in a day and a half, because you're going to get slaughtered for that.
Yeah.
You don't want to make it so that you could still be playing on day 10 and you'd still be seeing the openers batting.
MCG.
And how you get the science of creating that strip of ground to basically bring everybody into the game and to make it go into the afternoon on day 5, it's difficult. It's not easy, is it?
Well, no, it's not easy. Well, in Australia, we saw last year with India, pitches were left a little bit more grass on it, just to get some seam movement, some swing, or not swing, but seam movement in particular, make it bowling friendly. But after the end of day 1 and 2, it became an absolute flat road. So it's very hard to do to maintain that. And like I said, in Australia, I don't think they do enough of that. I think it's 2-dimensional now in Australia because of the drop in wickets. Now, it's easy to blame other sports, but other sports have been around just as much as cricket has in this country since the 1900s.
And if you build massive stadiums, you want to try and make the most of them, don't you?
Well, look at the Perth Stadium in the Wacker. The Wacker was a brilliant pitch. I think it was the best pitch in Australia. It was very quick. It was very bouncy. And I think if you made 100 as a away batsman, that really showed you've got talent. I think Ben Stokes was one of those players who did that. He scored that 100 in a fighting effort in the fourth innings and made that 100 at the Wacker. I think it was in 213, 214. Unfortunately, pitches like that don't exist now because of the new Perth Stadium, where you've got an AFL team that play heavily during the winter and don't want to play on true pitches because they might break their ankles, they might do their knees. So that yeah, go on, James.
Sorry, I was going to go. Just thought of something, and I wanted to get it in before we finish. The fact that COVID and the potential for the rejigged fifth Test match. The fact that Australia might get caught cold in the first Test match. You've been saying it for months. I mean, England aren't particularly on fire, are they? Because they've not had much cricket either. But there is that potential for the first Test match to. I mean, I've looked at the weather forecast. There's potential for it to not see a ball bowled. It's wall-to-wall rain for 5 days, which negates Australia's home advantage. Not a lot you can do about that.
Well,
second Test match is a pink ball Test match where England are in that. If they get the conditions, I mean, there's a lot of luck in a pink ball Test match. If you're holding that pink ball and Jimmy Anderson's got it in his hand when it starts to go bananas, then great stuff. But if Mitchell Stark's got it in his hands when it starts to go bananas, it goes against England. So there's a little bit of who's in the right place at the right time. But England could have the better of that. So you might be sat there after 2 Test matches thinking, blimey, this England side are 2-0 up. You're talking about it being dead after 3. It could be, because England could be 2-0 up after 2. And then if the final Test match is moved away from Perth, and they're talking about maybe that coming back to the MCG or coming back to Melbourne, Perth,
which I disagree in.
Perth's always been a place where England have failed. I think England have won 1 Test match at Perth all the way through. So that would be actually in England's favour. I mean, I'm not saying they necessarily win at the MCG either, but it's going to be England's favour if it goes away from Perth. So, the rejigging of the fixture list because of COVID and because of all these things actually potentially makes England a little bit more in the series.
I'm glad he actually mentioned that, the COVID. Now, as crazy as this might sound, I like to see if the 5th Test cannot be at Perth, I'd like to see that played at Hobart. Now, Hobart is a pitch historically for green tops, which would suit England more than Australia.
I mean, when just sorry to just interrupt there, but when everybody says, "Oh, create a green top," that suits England. Pat Cummins is not bad on a green top. Hazelwood's not bad on a green top. You kind of automatically need to assume that helps England. It helps Australia too. Yeah.
Well, it's more the conditions, because in Hobart there's a lot of cloud, even in the middle of summer. It doesn't get hot there. Compared to Adelaide, where in the middle of January it'd be 40. Hobart, barely 25. And it's cloudy, which will help swing.
I'll take that in England at the minute. It was snowing the other day.
Mate, if you live down here in a summer, especially in Adelaide, where the average temperature is 40, I think you can get through any part of the world during the summer, mate. Trust me on that, especially when you don't have aircon, especially when you're moving from house to house like I am, hopefully, to my new house that's being built, which I'm bloody excited for. I just hope it's not before the Ashes, or not during the middle of the Ashes, because I'm settled here. I've got an esky ready on my lounge. Going to be filled with all drinks and ice. No reason for me to get off the couch.
I'm coming over now. I'm commentating on quite a bit of the Ashes, and Christmas Day in England. I start commentating on the 3rd Test match at 11:30 at night on Christmas Day. So basically, I can't really have a drink. I'm gonna have to get some sleep because I'm overnight, and then on Boxing Day night in England, I'm on again. So after doing some football, so I'm going to be absolutely cream cracker during that Test match. I'll tell you now.
Gee, cricket and football. Well, you've got the best of both worlds covered there, mate.
Yeah, there's the massive Boxing Day program on the football, and then the Ashes starting. So I'm basically I've made the pledge to myself that I'm going to kill myself effectively during December and January, and then take some of February off and maybe go somewhere.
I'm a bit like that during the Ashes. You won't find me on Twitter during during the Ashes. You won't find me anywhere outside. I'll be just on my couch and glued to the Ashes. The only time you'll see me tweeting stuff is when either Australia doing really well and I'm happy and cheering and laughing at England, or Australia doing very badly and I'm raging like hell and throwing stuff across the room. But before we go, Gaurav, the boss, again, the India-New Zealand series, just based on New Zealand, if they actually do win this test match, would you say they're the best side in test match cricket? Let me rephrase that. If England win the Ashes, but New Zealand beat India in India, would you say New Zealand is the best team in the world right now?
New Zealand are better than England at the moment.
Yep.
And I don't think, with all due respect, this isn't a vintage Australian side. If England did beat Australia down under over the next couple of months, of course we'd be lauding it over you for years. But in cold light of day, this isn't a vintage Australia, and this isn't a vintage England. Whereas New Zealand have got 4 or 5 million people living there. There's more sheep than people, aren't there? I think the fact that they've got so few to pick from, but yet they are always competitive in everything they do. T20 World Cup, ODI World Cup, Test match #1 at the moment in the world in terms of the rankings. Anyway, I know you can take rankings with a pinch of salt, but they're a pretty good guide, aren't they? And they, the fact that they batted out for that draw in that first test match will give them a lot of confidence. And it's the sort of thing that a team that has faith in itself does. If you've been winning and you've been playing well and you're in there as a unit, you can still think that you can get out of something, even if it's starting to look a little bit forlorn. I mean, on the morning of day 5 of that test match, I thought New Zealand had a fair crack at winning that, but conditions and obviously having 2 spinners bowling at you and bowling tidily, obviously sort of turned the momentum around in that game. And Ashwin and Jadeja are not too bad, are they? In their own backyard. But
that Axar guy is pretty good. He's not too bad.
Well, they've got a few, haven't they? But so to kind of come out of that first test match with a draw is massive. And if they win the toss and they bat first and they stick 400 or 500 on the board in the second test match, who knows what could happen? I mean, certainly pound for pound, they're the best side in the world. And probably if you take out the pound for pound element, they are, I think they're at least as good as India at the moment, which is incredible because India have got 1.4 billion people living there.
I'm sick to death of that quote that Justin Langer brought up with the 1.4 billion. That gets played everywhere I see on Twitter, with Justin Langer where he made that ridiculous press conference, or not press conference, the end of post match interview where he said, India have got 1.4 billion, we've only got such and such. I hear that all the time on Twitter. And
I'll tell you what, though, it works both ways, though, because you've got 1.4 billion and you've got a load of other people, expats around the world. There's Indian people of Indian heritage living in Australia, America, England, everywhere.
Absolutely.
And they're all crazed about cricket, or most of them are, majority are. But you've got 1.4 billion. So if you think, well, half of those are women, they can go and play for the women's side, but you still got half of 1.4 billion, whatever it is. I can't even work out in my own head how much that is at the minute. But there's a lot of people that are, men that are desperate to pay for that men's side. But the flip side of that is the logistics of actually talent spotting and bringing the right people through and getting the right pathways through when you've got so many at the top end of the funnel and you're trying to funnel that down to 11 people in your national side. That is a hell of a task to get the right people through, isn't it? But I guess it's what a sports coach would say is a nice problem to have.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I wish we had that problem to have. I think I wish England had that problem to have, especially with their top order batting.
Yeah.
Also New Zealand found a gem in Cole Jamieson, who now has to be considered up there with Cummins and Hazelwood. That's probably the top 3 bowler. He was fantastic in that first test. if you did not see that.
Shaheen Sharafi's coming through as well, isn't he?
Yeah.
He's got himself into the top 5 in the ICC rankings. And
yeah, he was also good against Bangladesh last week. So
yeah. I mean, he's a guy who there aren't many all format players, are there? They're absolutely top end at all 3 formats. And Shaheen's certainly that now. You know, you've got Shaheen Sharafridi, you've got a few of the Kiwis, haven't you? You've got Trent Bolt and Lockie Ferguson and a few others around the world that are good in the, you know, Pat Cummins, you could argue, is the same. And Hazelwood's maybe a little bit lightweight in T20, but he's very good in ODIs and test matches. But, you know, it takes some doing to actually be genuinely world class at all 3 formats. Because as we started with, white ball and red ball, it is almost like a different sport these days. It's almost like table tennis versus tennis or something like that. So, you know, to be absolutely brilliant at all of them, you know, it takes some doing. And when Shaheen Sharafridi is on fire, he is almost unstoppable.
He'd be a problem in the Pakistan series against Australia after the Ashes. I don't know about England's record, but we haven't won in ages since 2005. Okay. That's disgraceful in my opinion. That's unacceptable. So and we've had opportunities to beat Bangladesh and bottled it. So I think you've lost a series to Bangladesh, isn't it, or drawn a series? Yeah, but you lost a test match.
It was a 2 test match series, and Bangladesh. I mean, I can remember somebody telling me that they. England trained really hard ahead of that against spin, because England have always got fallibilities against spin.
Yeah,
and they had Merlin. They had the Merlin machine on, and it was turning square. And they said that there's just no way of really replicating a match. You know, a strip that you've not seen before. It's turning. Some of them are keeping low. Some of them are popping up. You know, the variation in speed and the guile of the spinners and everything like that. It's actually really difficult to replicate that. So, you know, going to the places like India and Bangladesh for the likes of New Zealand, Australia, and England is really bloody difficult, isn't it? Because it's just completely different to whatever you've done before. And yeah, that's why, you know, after New Zealand scraped out that first test match with a draw, like we said before, they will be digging up that track for the second test match, and there'll be women walking down it with stilettos. They'll be putting sandpaper all over it. There will be, it'll be as rough as you can get.
It'd be one of those 2-day test matches like we saw in the second test match with England and India.
Yeah, but I mean, if you're having a bet, then you want to get on Ashwin or Axar Patel to get a million wickets, don't you?
I am a betting man. I do like a punt, but not in those series, mate. Maybe the Ashes. But anyway, that's it for today's show. We've been going on it for an hour. I do look forward to seeing you next. Hopefully, before the day's play or the day of the morning. Time constrictions are going to be pretty tricky. But welcome to my world when we have to play in England.
Well, Luke, I'm going to be on Australian time because I'm commentating for a lot of the test matches. So I'm going to basically I'm going to be on Australian time. So I won't know what day it is, what time it is, but I could be available.
Oh well, I was going to say then I can't wait for you to wake up when England's 500.
I'm looking forward to, like we said, after the second test match, England 2-0 up. Joe Root with a big smile on his face. Pat Cummins already sacked from his job.
It's
going to be a nightmare for you, mate. It's going to be a nightmare for you.
Well, I do know that Joe Root has had a 12-month purple patch, but his form's not going to continue. It's got to run out eventually.
That purple patch is his lower level. You want to see him when he's really playing.
I'm getting nervous already because of that, man. Because with Steve, you better hope so. You better hope so, mate. Because Steve Smith's after his 2019 Ashes, he's only made 100 since. So you better hope he continues.
It's that first ball. It's that first ball of the series, isn't it? That's the one that Harmison to second slip, or will it be Harmison into the grill of Justin Langer? It's which England turns up. That's the question.
Gee, I miss those good old days in those teams. Peterson, Collingwood, and Bell, Harmison, Hoggard, and all that. So those were the good old days. But anyway, James, thank you for joining us.
Always a pleasure. Cheers, Lucas.
Sorry, kept you on for so long. You know, it's 3 a.m. here, so I need to sleep. and we look forward to see you before the day one or after day one. So thank you, James, for coming. Okay, that's it for today's show. People, make sure to like and subscribe to the Cricket Badger. Tweet him, follow him. He likes reading all your opinions. He's very opinionated himself. So please follow him. Make sure to like and subscribe our channel. And thank you. And James, we'll see you before the day one. Thank you. Bye.